Hi, I'm Naomi Murphy, and this is the Locked Up Living podcast, where we talk with a wide range of people about harsh aspects of institutional life.
We also explore some of the ways to overcome them and to grow and develop. I'm David Jones. So join us every Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock UK time, for a fresh podcast.
So we're pleased to welcome along Graham House, who has a background in aviation, defence and security. He's been involved in safeguarding countries, organisations, people and values, and as a consequence of teams he has built, laws have changed and continue to change for the greater good. His leadership and strategic expertise have been instrumental in various high-stake environments, given his unique style. He continues to hold several executive positions, providing transformational leadership and driving organisational success, albeit his heart and his head is often found mostly in the sky, where he is at his most comfortable. Pleased to have you along today, Graham. Welcome.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here. And that just to soften that person you just read sounds very important. That's not me. My head is definitely in the clouds. What you've highlighted there is brilliant people I've been lucky enough to work with have done all of that. I've just been along the ride, really, just trying to do my bit. So it's not me. I'm much more of a muppet, to be honest.
Okay, well, take your modesty with a pinch of salt, Graham, because
Yeah, you'll be surprised.
The
reality, everyone knows the reality.
The phrase that you've been involved with, safeguarding countries, is pretty impressive. Anyway, it's really good to meet up with you today, Graham. Thanks for coming along.
I guess everyone's trying to do that in their own way, I suppose. I'm sure we'll come on to it. The institutions that you challenge, they're doing exactly the same thing. So I guess we all have the same objective. We just slightly do it in different ways, I suppose.
Sure. Well, we'll get into that. So, Graham, you had a long career in the RAF as a senior officer. Why did you end up leaving?
Well, I should say I loved my military career. I joined right at the bottom and was really lucky to meet some wonderful people who believed in me and trusted me and pushed me up into places I never thought I'd end up in. So it was wonderful. But it came to a point in relatively senior command, in a command responsibility position, that I guess you could summarize it as a conflict of interest in our core values of the military, what we say relative to what I realized we do. And it was that delta that I couldn't bridge in my conscience. And I realized I didn't want to carry the wound of that consciousness for the rest of my life. I thought it was appropriate. I'm very much inspired by people like Martin Luther King. Never ever be afraid to do the right thing. People will judge you, but it's a disproportionate to the wound that you'll carry. So there's those sorts of people that enlighten me over my lifetime. You know what? You get a choice here. You can be part of the problem and do well personally because of it, or you could actually elegantly, politely, respectfully try to explain why you're not going to do that. And that effectively is jumping like jumping off a swing when I was younger. A world of uncertainty suddenly takes you sometimes off to oblivion. But it was an informed choice. So yeah, we left unfortunately with a cloud, which is a shame. But that's the consequence of tough decisions.
Can you say a bit more about this conflict of values that you're mentioning? Because I suppose if we expect anything or believe anything, it's that in the military everything is clear and straightforward.
Yeah, there are three things happen. What can I say? Primarily, there was an allegation of rape on the base that I was in command of, a young girl, the allegation against the military instructor that effectively I was instructed or directed to cover up. I thought that was across the line, true to our values, not just the criminality of that was against our core values. At the same time, I was getting involved in the concealment of war crimes, the allegation of war crimes, and what appeared to be a cover-up of that. That, to me, was crossing the line quite significantly. And at the same time, I was involved in an individual complaint against the Secretary of State for Defence, with me as a named respondent that was going to an independent tribunal. And because I was a named respondent supporting the Secretary of State for Defence, I got involved in government lawyers, and their only interest was discrediting and denying and defending the case without even understanding the merits of the complaint. Effectively to destroy the individual who dared to bring the complaint against the department. Well, there's another red line. Hang on, it's I can't support that. In fact, I'm going to back for the other side. And suddenly you get into you put yourself in a point of conflict by those choices. They're ethical and moral. I wouldn't necessarily say principle, but they're ethical. So as the aggregate blend of all of that, just it became very serious very quickly.
Those three areas sound pretty heavy, actually, Graham. How did the RAF respond to your challenging of them in those areas?
I wouldn't say the RAF responded, because the RAF is just a name. You can't touch it. The people in the RAF, some were brilliant, some were incredibly supportive, some were neutral, some were very dismissive, some were really angry. And I think the heavy-handedness is in the legal element of not just the RAF, but defence as a whole, and then into government. And then you understand, well, the primary function of the legal department is to defend the department and its reputation at all costs. So I think if you break it down, you're really exposing your professional skills in terms of human behaviour. You get an insight into that rather than the organisation, which is just a name, the NHS, police, whatever it is. It's the people in it. But I've always had an interest in people and behaviours and what motivates us. Yeah, I think that's what... I think the society as a whole is on a watershed moment here. A really good opportunity when you look at the post office inquiry that's been in the public space every day for the last 5-6 months now. What you're seeing, yes, you can look at the legal. On one hand, it misleads the narrative and influences unjust outcomes. But fundamentally, to me, when I look at the root cause of all of this, it's just ineffective governance. And that is where a lot of my work ever since has been, you know what, I kind of expect non-executive directors, boards, trustees, chief execs, director generals, you're the custodian, you are the vanguard of those moral principles, those values. And that requires you to ask really awkward, insightful questions from a position of curiosity. Not just accept or contribute to groupthink or willful blindness, because that's where the lawyers will follow that narrative, and the lawyers will just follow and do what they think the board needs. So I think it's fascinating, that post office inquiry and the parallel inquiry with the armed forces allegations of the ongoing stuff with Afghanistan, the sensitive stuff. It just shows the cause of this is people not asking the right questions at the right time in the right way. And that's a lot of work I've done since then has been to try and address that and create a lot more curiosity in our formative years. So yeah, we could talk about that for days, really. Well,
it seems a little bit as though, certainly in what we see for the post office as well, as though the bureaucracy almost takes on a life of its own, and people forget the point behind why why the governance existed in the first place. So rather than thinking about what the principles are, to uphold whatever values, it all of a sudden it becomes a way to just kind of make sure the bureaucracy survives rather than the principles which drove it in the first place.
Hey, look, what I've learned in the last 10 years is, I'm just a dumb pilot, and I'm lucky to be that. I'm naturally dumb. The words I've learned and the behaviours I've explored and examined in the last 10 years has been life-changing. It's been a real deep immersion in wow. So I learned terms like psychological safety in organisations. Well, I've never heard of that. But I would say most of these institutions with public bodies are psychologically unsafe. Why? because over a generation, really, slowly, the word public service has drifted from behaviors to its true meaning to systems, processes, and the organization itself, not the person. And I think there's a real good opportunity, and you see this in the political debates at the moment, to firmly reset that button. That if you're in the NHS, if you're in the police, if you're in the judiciary space, if you're in the armed forces, anything that has the word public service in it, never ever forget, bottom line, you're there to serve the public, period. The minute you forget that, recognize you're in the wrong job, get out quick, then you become part of the problem. And I think that's what's happened in the post office reveals that when it was a public enterprise, they just followed the money and not the person. And I've used that myself, that learning I've used, everything I've done since is never ever forget the person in the arena, that quote. Don't forget the person that's in the heart of this, because it's so easy to drift from your values without you even knowing it subconsciously. So I don't blame people for this. It's a flaw in humankind. We can learn a lot from that.
Thank you. Graham, just to put some context into this, what was your career like up to the beginning of these events?
Brilliant. I was considered by people to be very successful. I had what they call legs in the organisation. I'd been selected and invited for loads of stuff that is an indication of higher command. So, I was very privileged to be given all these opportunities. I had tons and tons and tons of investment and personal development from inspirational people from all over the place. I've been on secondments with industry, so it's extremely successful, very rewarding, very enjoyable. But it changes, and this then brings you into other things I learned about the question of belonging and identity and moral injury. Suddenly you're part and badges and uniforms and codes. Suddenly you no longer belong simply because you've asked some awkward questions. But actually the purpose of the question is to contribute to continuous improvement in the organization. It's just been misunderstood, misinterpreted, or heavily defended, because there might be some truth in that. So suddenly when I realized, the only time I realized when I was suddenly out was when my medical records were changed, as were my annual appraisals. My annual reports were changed from really good to not so good. And obviously then I realized, well, that's obviously going to happen because I don't own that data. The organization does. And it can adjust it any way you want, sometimes without you knowing, in a very sinister way, in order to influence the narrative.
Did you say they changed your medical records as well?
Yeah, I became. It's fascinating because especially when what happened to me, it absolutely took an impact on my. I started losing sleep, which is unusual for me. There's a disorientation and a confusion, even with my resilience. You start losing sleep, you go and see the military doctors, and then you go see the military psychiatrist, and then you get labelled as you've got this issue. No, I think I'm all right, actually. And I don't really want to take the pills that you're prescribing. I don't want to be subject to that. I want you to get to the root cause of why I'm asking the question. Let's resolve this in a collaborative way. I don't want to be treated as ill or a patient. But as I realized, once you start getting these labels of you might be losing your mental faculty and therefore your capacity, and you might actually have a condition and therefore you're mad, that contributes to the legal argument of the person actually isn't quite sane.
Yeah, it's a very common. That's a well-recognised strategy as well, isn't it? That's a path that people are shunted down. Go and see a psychiatrist, and then that's weaponised against you for disagreeing. Yes, it's very, very common. There's quite a lot written about that.
Yeah, and that's what I think. What you're doing is so important for society. Is and I get labelled as trouble. This isn't trouble. This is important, really important for societal value. But when you start believing people saying you're just causing trouble, okay, there's a lot of uncertainty. You go through a lot of self-doubt. You become isolated in your mind without actually that being the reality. A lot of this is perception, and it's really part of an attrition policy. There's a lot of groupthink in there and a lot of psychological unsafety without individuals necessarily understanding what they're doing or why. And it takes a huge amount of self-awareness and self-belief and self-trust to get through that phase. So it's not surprising to me that many people not just struggle, but it's life-changing, life-defining, and sometimes life-taking. It's because no one's taught this, no one's trained in this, and yet actually, there's an absolute need for integrity to do this in a better way, because fundamentally everyone has the same objective. We just and the process isn't going to achieve it at all. It requires an open, meaningful conversation with a bit of courage, and that to me is a core leadership principle. You need that, and I guess the only way you'll know you've got integrity is when you're being asked to sell it out. Then you'll know it.
Thank you, Graham. That's very well put. Just to clarify things for me a little bit, because it sounds to me as if you're describing a situation where probably things had been changing subtly around you, and then suddenly you had a realization of things changing. You made a kind of discovery in a sense.
Yes. It was an enlightenment. Can you not hear me? It's probably all monitored by the intelligence services. Is that working?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Good.
And so where was I? I was talking about the enlightenment phase.
Yes.
You just mentioned Nigel McClain.
Yeah, Nigel McClellan talks really well about our belief systems and how fundamental they are to our feelings, our thinking, our actions, our decisions, and our life outcomes. I find that fascinating because I had to widen my belief systems from what I thought the organization was and what I thought was of good heart and good faith. I had to widen my belief system to think maybe actually that's not correct. Maybe I've been narrow and closed and part of this group thing and part of it without recognizing it. It can creep up on you. So I did an awful lot of work with very capable people from your background, your profession, to widen that belief system to allow me not just to be resilient, but to understand myself. I recognized I was in a very destructive phase in my life at that point. I wasn't safe. The people around me, I thought, were in an unsafe position because of that as well. That was unfair. There were a lot of dangers and a lot of risks because of the sensitivity of all of this. There were a lot of threats. And so I literally went up to my home in the Highlands and destroyed my cottage. Literally. I took a sledgehammer to it and destroyed it. And I did that purposely, to get the anger out. There's a lot of anger, and I wanted to channel it to something that has no feelings, like bricks. That'll do it, not people. That would be unfair. It not deserving of that. And it would give me the space to work out what's going on, reevaluate my objectives, recognize and reset myself and my sense of self, my understanding. And importantly, it would put me in a creative space where I could rebuild, not just the house, but myself. So it was a rebuild moment. It wasn't a change house, it changed me by character. It was strengthen me in every component part. So I did that. I completely disconnected from my network, from life itself. I very deliberately went to a quiet place to see an undistorted view of the world, if that makes sense. Just see it for what it is and keep it in perspective. Don't let it define. I gave myself some red lines. This will not define me. I won't be a victim of it. It will shape me for the positive. I'll learn an awful lot. I'll go as far as I possibly can in order to learn as much as I can and then reapply that for the greater good for others. So it was a tough journey, but a decided one. It was a deliberate decision. So that's because I got the enlightenment, because I understand what Professor McClellan was on about. You need to go right back to your belief systems. There's a huge caption of self-awareness, self-trust, resilience, and self-confidence. It's self-belief. Where I get that from, I don't know. But that inspired me to think everyone needs a bit of that at some point in your life, and the education system doesn't give us that by nature. And if you don't get it in your home life or your environment, then you're going to get flattened when these things happen. And it might just be grief in a relationship or a partner or parents. It could be the loss of something or life itself or redundancy, anything, COVID. Life, as you know, it can hit you really hard. So I expect people to take some self-responsibility to prepare better for that, not just become a consequence of that, because it's anticipated. So I met incredibly capable people that I would never have met before if I didn't make the decisions that I made. So my life is, in a weird way, much more enriching for it. There's some battle scars from it, but that actually makes me a little more grounded, more rounded, more authentic, more comfortable with who I am. I'm imperfect, I'm perfectly flawed, and that's okay. I try and do better tomorrow.
Gosh, that's such an interesting story, Graham, especially about your house. Because one of the things that's so striking about you is that you really, I think, exude quite a lot of calm reasonableness. And I think, working with people who've trodden down a similar path to you, quite often people when they've experienced recrimination on quite a grotesque scale, they quite often end up quite angry and obsessive. And so I'm curious about what it is about you or your journey that made you realise that this was what you need. What was the wake up call for you?
I think this where I'm naturally optimistic in my core. I'm naturally laid back and relaxed, and some people have a reputation. You're too relaxed, you just don't get it. No, I get it perfectly. I'm just trying to stay calm. Whilst you're losing your sense of rational thought, I'm trying to stay calm. I have a discipline there, and I think a lot of that discipline came from my parents in my upbringing. Youngest of four as well, sort of back of the queue. It made me very grateful, very humble in a soft sense. But fundamentally, I would recognize my military training, especially air traffic and piloting. Military flying training especially is an operational stuff. The whole ethos is you're not good enough, you need to do better, and these are the tools to make you better. And if you start from that foundation, you will recognize, just be careful, Graham, you're one person questioning the reputation of the armed forces on the global stage. You be respectful, be careful, you might be wrong, you probably are wrong. So don't go telling them that they're wrong and you're right. That insistence would recognize as a lack of self-awareness. Try and find a way to explain your anger rather than express it. And that requires the narrative to shift from me, and the hurt is causing me to, hang on a minute, if this is giving me such a tough time and I'm having to adapt that and that's not easy, then how on earth would a young 20-year-old soldier cope with this? Especially if you're a young female on a base where you feel you've been sexually assaulted and you can't get off the base and your predator is still around. Now you're in an interesting question there. And I think when you start presenting the facts of the matter that way, or to families who's in foreign lands, whose children or husbands mostly have been killed, and they're wanting to know why, it's perfectly reasonable, perfectly correct, then actually we have a social responsibility to address that. So I guess my military flying training and the discipline and the moral questioning it gave me really helped, as did my upbringing, as did my general sense of, my worldview. I've been very lucky to travel a lot in my life, in my early days as well. It gave me an ability to keep some sort of perspective on it. Yeah, it's my world today, but I'll decide what my world is tomorrow. Not you, not the system, not the complaint, not the general. I'll decide that. And it taught me about I own my emotional responses. Yeah, my emotions will decide my emotional reactions. That's the nature of my brain. It's going to defend and protect. but I've got enough here and enough there to balance it and take control of those responses. And that, again, is what a great opportunity that is to explore how far can I go with that, and then put that into the educational system and develop young children with that, because they're going to need that. Not just in the UK, all over the world. So we have an opportunity here to invest in that. And again, COVID teaches us that. So there's always a positive, out of every challenge, there's a positive. And as long as you remember that and stay hopeful, I'm confident you'll be all right. You really got to think lucky, and don't take yourself too seriously. Don't get a sense of self-importance. It's not that big relative to the other parts of the world. People are trying to survive and get through the day and eat. We live in a country that's blessed with social housing, public health, public education at no cost. And we take it for granted and we criticize it. Well, it's doing a lot of good, while sometimes it's not doing it well. Let's not forget that the good and the great people that are in it delivering. You try and balance it, I think. And I wouldn't say it's calm reasonableness on my part. I just have a determination to learn and not be flattened by it. And I think when you embrace that, you start seeing it in a more holistic way. You approach it in a more understanding way, and you look for understanding, and you surround yourself with people who challenge you and give you a hard time as well. So it's not about winning. It's about helping others get through tough times. And I don't like the phrase where, I won, you lost. Okay, everyone lost then. I'm much more into that term, absolute gains. Everyone wins. So I think you need a soft character to challenge anyone in order to build a relationship of trust. I've learned loads from it.
As you were talking, I was reminded of something you said in conversation where, we were reflecting on the fact that most people who speak up and challenge authority in some way, doing so because they're sacrificing their own well-being by prioritising the good, what they believe they're prioritising is the good of the greater good, society. But ironically, when they're faced with recrimination, then people can become quite obsessed by getting justice at that point and trying to claw back their reputation, I guess, and everything else they feel they've lost. But it seems like, what you're saying is you need to find your bigger picture again and get back to focusing on the purpose that you have where you're prioritising society again.
Yeah, again, you need and I don't know how you get it. That's probably an interesting area to explore sometime. You need a lot of self-awareness, a lot of self-responsibility, and a recognition that you're one person on a planet of 8 billion. Get a grip, behave, be sensible, be rational, understand why the system is defending. It's not personal. It has a reputation that you are loyal to as well. So there is a collective need there, and I can understand how it can take people off to a very dark place. I can understand that, but all that does to me is reinforce what's your purpose then. What are you on the planet for? Question. Work that out. There's no easy answer to that. You go off on a journey there and work out why you're questioning in the first place. What's your game? What's the objective? And therefore, you have to reevaluate that as you go. And I guess one of the many lessons I've learned is the word surrender. I grew up, in the world of John Wayne. No defeat, no surrender. We'll fight to the end of the Alamo. But actually, mentally, that's the worst thing to do. Surrender doesn't mean give up or give in. It means conserve your energy for a fight on another mountain. You want to come off this one because rationally, sensibly, practically, emotionally, it's not achievable. Find another way, and that means going over that mountain. And if that's called surrender, then surrender. It's a recognition of self-awareness and self-responsibility for a greater good. And then what you're doing, as you then discover you're actually acting on what you believe to be right, you're actually destroying the very narrative that people are creating against you that you're mad. No, I'm rational in my thinking. I'm reasonable in the way I'm going about it. And you're showing yourself to be the person that you are. Whereas if you don't do that, you're actually contributing to the very narrative that people are saying that you've become. Angry, aggressive, obstructive, opinionated, righteous, all the things that no one set out to be, but can end up becoming. And then at some point then you're no longer fighting a system, you're fighting yourself. So you're hurt. And you haven't recognized that. Then there's the regret there's the grief, there's the loss. There's an emotional response naturally that we haven't understood ourselves. And that, again, is a really powerful opportunity to learn. But you're not necessarily in the right emotional space to embrace that. So that's why my experience from this, it gives you a really strong conviction. Go upstream and start educating young people in their formative years to be resilient, so that when these things happen, they're more likely to respond better to it because they've got the habits. They've got the behaviors at a formative stage. It's normalized. For adults, you've got to unlearn a lot of stuff. And wow, that is tough for anyone. So it is a lot easier. Write off adults, it's too difficult. There's a professional gain there. Good luck. But it's a lot easier to go upstream and start educating children in a much more transformational way than the current systems do. So again, a huge opportunity for individuals and society as a whole to be stronger. There's an economic gain into it, and there's a human need for it. So there's loads of positives from it that I would always take from the negatives. I'd encourage everyone to do it. If you feel in your heart, no, this isn't right, then step up. And true to the wisdom of Luther King, I mentioned him earlier. I think I'll misquote it, but it says something like, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It's beyond your lifetime. And then you get a sense of understanding of where you fit in the world. It's just one person in the lifetime that you've got, as blessed as you are to have a life. And if you're blessed to wake up in the morning, then do something good with it. There's a lot of spirituality in that as well, I guess.
Thank you, Graham. And one of the things that you seem to have channeled your sort of creative energy into afterwards is, were you involved in starting Justice for Troops?
Yeah, I felt I didn't have a clue what I was doing, to be honest. When I was what was happening, I didn't understand. What was happening to me and my behaviour, I didn't understand. What worried me was when the organisation pushed down on the individual who made the allegation about rape. And I thought, hang on a minute, if we're not going to investigate that, what's stopping us not investigating death on the battlefield that we might have caused? Where does the line stop there? There's no end to that behaviour. Where's that get? And unbeknown to me at the same time, that was going on. That became aware to me soon after the court case where the military individual went to prison. Because I'm not saying, had I not done what I'd done, they'd have never gone to prison. I would never say that. The evidence took us to a truthful destination. So I'm a great believer in, don't predetermine anything, don't prejudge anything, don't prejudge anyone. Let the evidence take us through an independent approach and see we'll address that at that point. So that's why I set up the organisation. I was extremely worried that youngsters would not be able to survive this.
Can you say a bit about what Justice for Troops is, what it's involved, what its aim was?
It was an evidence-based body that I wrote very sincerely to very senior ministers and the Defence Corps that, you know what, I don't actually believe your narrative. That's not to say I'm right. I'm just saying I don't believe your narrative and embrace it in that way, elegantly. That's not easy. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to disprove it, or I'm going to prove it, or I'm going to improve it. I'm going to do that by setting up this organisation. I just call it loosely, it does what it says. And I'm going to invite people from the armed forces, from all ranks, and their families, and veterans, to give me the evidence where they think we're getting things wrong to their detriment. I thought this will be great because there will just be one case and it will be my name on it. Not be it. And they're great. It was all my fault. I got it wrong. I'm incredibly sorry. You go to jail or whatever happens. Quite right. That wasn't the case. And I'm not proud of this, but that organization was incredibly successful, but for the wrong reasons, because it highlighted a real issue of scale that I don't think, and I got a lot of luck with the Prime Minister at the time, Cameron, Secretary of State for Defence, Chief of Defence. They told me in my house actually, that they lack the 20,000-foot overview at their level, well, therefore you're not seeing the ground truth. And if you're not seeing the ground truth in the Ministry of Defence, then you're probably not seeing it in the Ministry of Justice or the Ministry of Education.
So can you just clarify, Graham? So what you said that there was success, but not in a way that you would have liked. Were they finding crimes? Committing of
crimes? Crimes is one thing. Cover up is completely different. The evidence was very compelling when it went to Parliament. So that my sponsor was Parliament, the select committees. The evidence was overwhelming that there's not just crime here, there's a cover-up of it. And therefore there's a very deliberate behaviour in the corridors. And that's the legal branch.
So presumably you're talking about things like bullying, sexual offences, yeah.
Yeah, we're not talking about complaints about the Russians, not relevant.
Yeah.
We're talking about law. And why do I think that's ethically, morally essential for the armed forces? The armed forces is the only legal arm in the United Kingdom framework that's got the legal right to carry arms inside of the country. You therefore have a mandate to be not perfect, but be above that at all times, consistently, constantly. You set that standard. The minute you drop below that, you've set a new standard. Well, now you take that attitude into the battlefields in someone else's country, there's going to be a disaster. And I would summarize the last 20 years proves that. It's not being anywhere near the standard that we expect. So I see this as an opportunity to reset and rebuild for a real purposeful outcome. It's not to blame anyone or criticize anyone. It's an opportunity to learn and yet hold people to account if they've broken into the law, by all means. That's the point of the law. So it was the most serious crimes that surfaced at scale. And I also think that the very courageous people that came forward, that was probably about 10% of it. It's at scale. And the Post Office again shows that. And it's not just in the Ministry of Defence. This is society gone wrong. So again, well, if we can conclude that's not right, then there's an opportunity then to correct that and fix it for a greater good. So that's why I went to Parliament. I didn't trust the chain of command anymore. I didn't trust the Defence Corps. I found it willfully blind, corrupted through the narrative, misled by the legal framework. Okay, I'll go to Parliament. We'll try that. And I got some real support there. Some really sensitive stuff I started doing that I was then funded to do as well, to a place I never thought I'd be looking at. But it just shows where curiosity can kill the cat. I've got a curious mind. You have to be careful how you exercise that. So there's a lot of humour in this. Don't take myself too seriously, but the issues are serious. And that requires an elegant, sensitive approach to it, a collaborative approach.
So, Graham, I was reading, you mentioned Parliament, and I was reading some of your parliamentary submissions, which are online, and one was with regard to single persons living accommodation and the impact of poor quality, lack of hot or even running water, broken fixtures and fittings. And it really reminded me of the prison service and things like prison officers being asked to bring in their old uniform for new prison officers just joining up to wear. Why does this kind of thing matter so much in public service? Because that thread is there throughout your career, I think, this concern with actually taking care of people.
Yeah, I'll give you a real good example of this. I'm put in a position of command, a real privileged position, great. And I'm going to meet by appointment, not because it's Graham, by appointment, I'm going to meet some very powerful people, kings, queens, ministers, prime ministers. They're going to come to my house, my official residence.
Okay.
My staff, as much as I love my staff, because it's the new boss and you're going to meet lots of important people, we need to paint your house. We need to recarpet it, recurtain it. Well, hang on a minute. The country is in the middle of a financial crisis. My default was my mum and dad. They'd be really angry if I was spending their money on my curtains and my house to impress my boss. You got that completely wrong. So I'm not funding that. I want these people to see how threadbare my carpet is. I want them to see the walls are a mess. I don't have any curtains. It's not relevant. What I'm more interested in is spending that money on hot water for my soldiers and my troops, so they get 3 square meals a day and they don't have to pay for it. And therefore, when it's of such a bad standard, I'm going to lose them. Their morale will go down. And then I've created unintentionally a performance problem that I didn't have before. I need ministers to see that. So there is a strong message there from the public point of view. This is public money. And again, it comes back to the core issue. When those responsible for the administration of it fail to recognize their public servants, you end up with corruption. Bottom line, it's corruption and fraudulent use of the exchequer. Well, now we really need a tough conversation about that. And that requires a behavioural change. Again, recognise you're in the public service because that's what it says on the box, the clues in the title. You're a servant to the public. If you forget the importance of running hot water for your soldiers, you're in no business to be in command. If you can't manage that money in a better way with an effective contract, you're in no business to be managing or governing public money. And then you take that across everywhere, DVLA, NHS, everywhere. And so again, it can get you angry, and it should get you angry. But I think as human beings, as adults especially, you've got an opportunity here to channel it in a meaningful way, not just an aggressive way. We can behave better, and we should behave better. So again, collaborate and cooperate and mobilize on that narrative. And that's really what Justice for Troops did. It expressed a collective anger and put an obligation on Parliament that was overwhelming. You cannot just ignore this now. It's at such a scale, you act on it. And it created a momentum. It wasn't just Justice for Troops. A lot of people galvanized around it and grew around it. Diane Ellen, Philip Ingram, some amazing people. Emma from Justice for the Centre for Military Justice. There are some incredible people out there on the same mandate, doing it for a greater good for other people. And once you reach them and discover them, wow, it's empowering. It's a privilege to work with people like that, and it really gives you a sense of joyfulness. With wow, people do actually care. You can do something. You can collaborate and cooperate for a greater good. And that's actually, I would say, is essential to recognize that. That's part of the healing process. It's part of the growing process. And then you recognize, actually, this experience, if you're smart, you can, you came up with a word the other day, repurpose.
Mm-hmm.
You can repurpose yourself and your identity and get back to what you know you are to be. And I know myself to be a calm, relaxed, easygoing bloke. There's nothing more I like than a plate of chips on the beach in my Land Rover. Nothing more. I'm that simple. I just got entangled in some really complicated stuff by the nature of the profession that I chose. No one told me to do this. No one told me to make a complaint. I chose to do that. So I'm completely responsible for everything that happened, good, bad, or indifferent. And the grief I caused people, I'm incredibly sorry, and I'll always be sorry for that. It wasn't intentional. I guess it's the nature of it. I was learning about myself at the same time. And what I definitely didn't want to do was put those close to me in harm's way. So it's all I can say is sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Conscious of the time, I do want to make sure we give you space to talk about your latest venture. So, David, should we skip to you to ask?
Right, yes. So, well, shall we do that then? Can you tell us about your latest venture, which I gather is called the Social Impact Academy?
Thanks. This came back again through fortuitous circumstance, I suppose. I've met a whole different section of society that I think I would never have met if I followed my original career path. And then I was invited to take on what they loosely call the chairmanship role and an interim executive role. Well, okay, that sounds really grand for me, really. Let's see where it can help. But what attracted me to it was what I would call in the government side, what we call the comprehensive approach, which was generally a model of the military can't really do what it needs to do without support with the Foreign Office. We can't really do that without support with the intelligence services. So you get all three departments operating together in a comprehensive way to secure a higher level policy. It sounds great until you bring in different budgets and different people with different agenda and different reputational needs. Then it breaks. So, but I do believe in that concept. You can do a lot more and accomplish more together than on your own. So really, this is bringing together amazing, capable people and young people as part of an early leadership experience for them to a centralized point where we're deep in education, where we're deep in the judiciary, where we're deep in the police, deep in the NHS and other parts of public service in a joined up way. And a really good example of why that matters, there's an individual, Dave Breakspear, happens to be in London, but it could be anywhere. There's lots of Daves around. He's of a neurodiversity background. I didn't even know the term when he was young. It was just a misfit, didn't belong.
I think we've interviewed him. I think he's been a guest on here. Yes.
You'll know his story, but
yeah.
He reckons, because he drifted at an early stage, didn't respond well to education, got in trouble with the police, you think,
yeah,
got in trouble with the judiciary, went to prison, and he reckons that's just one person, his journey has cost the taxpayer £5 million. Right. Okay. Then you need to go upstream and start working with young people of a neurodiversity background and the education department and the judiciary and the police and the health systems at the same time. You need them in the same room in the decision-making space to make informed decisions that directly impact the person, because that person is going to be part of a family, part of a community, and everyone's going to hear that story. And I want that story to be positive. This is what we can do when we work together for you, because you matter. One person. And if you can do that for one person, it will be what I'd call a positive COVID. It will be a positive contagious effect because it mobilizes people to believe. It recovers a sense of trust and hope. And that's all the Social Impact Academy it is. It's as simple as that. We bring good people together to do good stuff, not knowing what that potential is, but in the firm belief that people inherently are good, inherently.
So it sounds a little bit like networking opportunity, a way to help people build bridges and a network that can support changing things for the better, but particularly trying to recruit younger people to get involved.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. There's two points on that, I guess, briefly. Build bridges, don't burn them. We can all learn from that. And as someone really clever has joined us, Dr. Tony, incredible guy. He actually writes the laws for equality laws. He writes the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. He's at that space. I want to connect the person next door to him. I want them to influence that decision making because it affects them. Not people in some smart building in New York or Geneva. No, it affects you next door. You want to be involved in this, get engaged. So he has a great approach to this. We bring the tools, not the sticks. You know, it's so simple that it's so easy to do that. Everyone gets a choice as to how you respond to this. And therefore, rather than say be kind in an instructional way, create that education in an early way with example as adults. We're adults. It's incumbent on us to behave in a reasonable way as a citizen because everyone's watching, everyone's seeing. Especially children, as a parent, they're going to watch you and they're going to learn from that. So somehow act responsibly, act as an adult, behave as an adult, be the person that you want to be. And so there's a great, fun, joyful element to this with the people we're in, especially with the youngsters getting involved. I love empowering people with, look, you can lead this. I'll help you with the little I know, but I'll be accountable for it when it all goes wrong, so don't worry about it. Just go for it. Follow your heart. Don't worry about your fears. There's loads of clever people around you with experience. and you just go for it. And at that young age, when you can now say that I believe in this and I started leading on that, you don't have to say I'm a leader. It's obvious you're a leader. At the age of 22 or 24 or 17, it doesn't matter to me, but you're showing people in employability, hang on a minute, it's not just a job, your attitude is what I want. Right, now I'm looking at chief executive material. Now I'm looking at director general material. Today you might be a mechanic fixing a car, wondering why is it built that way and there's a better way. You might be doing an Airfix model, aged 11 as a young girl, thinking, how do these instructions work for someone who's blind or visually impaired? Right now, that sort of person can sort out global climate crisis. That way of thinking can sort out nuclear fusion and secure health needs for Africa. Those people that aren't misfits, they just think differently, have a massive place in society. We just don't have yet a mechanism to lift them. So our first conference is on neurodiversity for that reason. These people are just different. These are the code breakers. These are the pattern people. These are the people that we think are weird or odd. No, they're suitably odd. You want them in your team. We have to adjust, just as everyone has to adjust. So, again, it's good fun and a great opportunity. And it's always, as you know, it's always fun to work with young people because they get it. It's adults don't get it. We've sort of learned bad stuff. Youngsters we don't want them to learn bad stuff. So there's a great example there, I think. If we can lift this model, then I think we'll be successful in the UK because it makes everyone look good. That's great for everyone's reputational and health. I had that conversation with senior people in Birmingham today. Well, then lift that from the UK and put it in other parts of the world. It's going to make the UK look brilliant, as it should. That's the reputation we want. It's the clues in the title. It's united. It's a united approach. Whereas in the world today, as you recognise, it feels fragile. The national mood is fragile. The global feeling is fragile. There's a lot of hatred. There's division. We're not looking after our neighbour. We own that decision as to which way do we want to go in as a society, because it's not that way. There is a unified way. So, it's fun. I'm very optimistic. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, but I know I'm surrounded by brilliant people.
Thank you, Graham. And if anyone wants to get involved in that or is interested to find out more in case they want to, what are you how do they do that? And what are you hoping for?
I can delegate that one. I haven't got a clue. There's a website called the Social Impact Academy, and that I'm really simple. We just do what it says. That's what it does. We do high impact, positive G. There's a website on there, and there's an email there.
And we'll share a link to that in our show notes so that and
there's even an email that comes to me, but I'm too, as you've seen from my administration today, I'm completely disorganized on my own. I'm not good on my own. I'm hopeless on my own. But I learned very early in life, copy brilliant people, surround yourself with brilliant people, and they will bring you through your own incompetence. It's essential people do that. Find good people and work with good people, and you'll learn an awful lot very quickly. So, I'm blessed to have amazing people with me. Why they're with me, I think it's more out of a mystery tour than anything competent on my part. So, but a lot of fun.
Thank you.
That was great, Graham. I just want to say that a few minutes ago, I thought you gave a brilliant example, strict description of therapeutic containment when you were talking really about taking responsibility for other people's experiments. And of course, those experiments can be practical in nature, or they can be reflective and psychological. So thanks very much for that.
Pleasure.
Great meeting you.
I hope that was helpful. It's contributing to what you're trying to achieve in your own initiative, which I thank you for. It's very graceful to be part of it. Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Great to meet you. Thanks a lot.
Right. Take care, right? Enjoy the
Thank you. Yeah.